Welcome to Uncaged, a show that celebrates thought leadership from today's top business leaders. The program provides a voice to amazing executives from around the globe who are shaping the world of business today and mapping the path to the commerce of tomorrow. Today, we're speaking with Tim McMillan. Hey, Tim, how are you?
Great, thanks, man. How are you doing?
I am very, very well. I'm excited to talk to you about a topic that I think a lot about, which is really customer experiences. Tim works for a company called Profound. He is their director. Profound is a company that's very much focused on improving customer experiences. They help businesses use insight to build great customer experiences, make smarter technology choices, and prepare their teams for digital transformation. And so we'll get into that in a second. Before we get there, Tim, tell me a little bit about your background.
Sure. Well, first of all, thanks again for having us on the show today. Great to meet you. And what can I say about myself? I guess at my core, at my heart, I'm a designer. That's how I trained. And I was really lucky when I left uni to land a job in a great company over here in the UK called B&Q, a bit like Home Depot or
Yep.
Lowe's over in the US. And I was part of the original team that was tasked with building their e-commerce website.
It was what's the tagline? Just do it, B&Q it, or something like that?
You can do it when you B&Q it. Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah, I've got the tattoo as well.
Excellent.
So that's where it all started for me, and we were doing this thing that no one else had done before. We were trying to monetize the internet from a retail point of view back in the late 90s. And had a great time there. Ended up leading the design team, and we become really successful. But after a few years, I decided I'd stretch my legs a little bit and try a few different roles. But what I really understood about myself after working for a few other organizations was that what I enjoyed the most about the work that I was doing was the variety and solving different challenges and experiencing different brands. So that's what led me to start my first agency back in about 2005, 2006. Mm-hmm. Back then, we were pretty much purely design focused, but that didn't last very long because the rate of revolution really in digital accelerated up to the late noughties, and over the years, the agencies evolved into pretty much what we used to refer to as full service. But we start with the design. That's the important thing for us, understanding the experiences that customers need in order to enjoy doing whatever they're doing, be that shopping or working or engaging with friends, colleagues, stuff like that. We really start with the customer experience. So I guess, as I said, at my core, I'm a designer, but I have this real interest in technology and how the symbiotic nature of design and technology coming together to make things better for users and customers is the bit that really kind of fires my rockets. Yeah.
And Tim, I mean, I think the great thing about that is that you've lived the shift in the experiences individuals have. I mean, if you remember back in the day, B&Q, they probably give the digital team a little bit of a hard time. They'd say, oh, well, you guys, your revenue that you guys make on that website is only worth one store or something like that. Nowadays, it's completely shifted, right? So it's a much, much more central task that we're talking about. And now you're the director at Profound, which is very much a company that focuses on that shifted digital experience. So tell me more about what's going on at Profound.
Well, we operate in a few areas. We have specialities in design, we have specialities in technical implementation, data and strategy and consultancy from a digital point of view. So we can work with companies individually on any of those kind of topics or projects, but it really comes to life when actually we get to bring that full suite of our specialities together. And so just to give you an indication of the sort of things we do, we specialize in probably three main areas. So we build enterprise scale e-commerce solutions and experiences. We help B2B organizations to think about how they can modernize their really old, cumbersome legacy technology to increase team efficiency and then improve their business customer experiences. And then we think about how we can use data within an organization to improve how people do their work, to democratize the insights that exists in different corners of an organization and bring that data into the hands of the everyday kind of employee at work to do better things. So it's interesting. We started off with design all those years ago, but you can't carry on with that. You can't ignore technology and data. and things as they've evolved over the years. So
Yeah.
yeah, it's really nice to have that diversity about the work that we do.
Yeah, no, it's absolutely true. And I remember that when kind of things were kicking off in the digital age, back in kind of like the mid 90s, a lot of the folks came from like either a design background or, interestingly enough, an architecture background.
Yeah.
And those were the people that kind of were the bridge into building out these new worlds that that we're focused on now, and certainly Profound is shaping. So, I mean, when you think about what your customers are focused on, what are the primary topics that they're really pushing on these days?
Experience improvement and trying to differentiate themselves from their competitors through the experience that they deliver. That's one key starting point for us. Either something's broken and they want to fix it, or there is something new that they want to try and they want help prototyping that and understanding what it means, or they want to do a complete kind of shift away from the status quo of what they've always done, and work with someone to really reimagine those experiences that customers can have. So that's one aspect of what we do. And then the other aspect is helping companies that have maybe even for as many years as 20 years, been really held captive by the technology infrastructure, landlocked into what is really out of date, irrelevant technologies that were fine back when, the internet was just a burgeoning thing, but now, just completely unfit for purpose in today's world. But because their business has grown and evolved and built on top of these solutions, they come to us to help understand how they can escape from that, and what the art of the possible is in the future from a technology point of view, and how that can improve things, all across their organization, not just from like the technology point of view, but from how people operate on a day-to-day basis and how their customers engage with them and things like that. So I guess those are the two main ways that we help.
Yeah, I mean, those are huge ways and foundational areas that you're working on. We joked a bit before the interview today about that experience, right? The customer experience, because we know if it's engaging, if we know that they're pulled in and they feel as if they're valued and that there's some intelligence there, there's a tremendous amount of value that can be built and captured in that process. However, sometimes when people want to end a relationship in customer experience, i.e. kind of pull out, it's almost impossible for people to cancel subscriptions, etc. I mean, it's a fascinating game that's being played there. What do you make of all of that?
Well, I think it comes down to attitudes at the organization level as to what they really care about from the customer experience. If they just care about acquisition and not the experience post-sale, then yeah, you'll end up in those situations where customers, they're really treasured and valued when you're buying or repeat ordering or whatever it may be. But yeah, it's quite a frustrating outlook that some organizations can have, where actually you value the customer up to the point where they want to leave, and they don't always want to leave because they've had a bad experience. They just, maybe they're too old for something anymore, or it doesn't interest them, or they've become vegetarian. They don't want whatever it is. There's many reasons. It's not just because they've had a bad experience. And even if it was because of a bad experience, they should have the right to choose whether or not they continue to shop or engage with a brand. So yeah, from my point of view, I think when we think about that customer life cycle, we make sure that the spine of the experience starts right from when someone's exploring options and trying to discover what solutions they are for whatever it is that they're looking to do, right up to the point where they've ordered and they've been onboarded, or they're in that kind of loyalty stage and they're trying to build that brand advocacy with the customer, and what happens after that first sale. Because that's actually the really interesting thing for us, because everything is quite commodity based now online. It's easy to find something cheaper, something you can get sooner. So what is it that would make the difference between someone choosing to shop between brand A and brand B? And it comes down to experiences, and those experiences have to encapsulate the entire customer life cycle, not as I said just now, just the point where they part with the cash.
It's always a funny one, because I always think about the metrics that people follow, and they talk about things like the cost per acquisition and how that's going and the effectiveness of the optimization on the site. And then they'll talk about the retention and the length of time that someone's spending, i.e. the engagement level, size of basket, all of those lovely things, right? And yet, it all sounds great, but if there's no way to actually cancel your subscription, then maybe that retention number is needs to be balanced off of maybe a customer happiness survey that might not be as supportive. But you're absolutely right. It seems to be that connection when you get the culture of the company right, that commitment to a real understanding of that customer, right, and a support of it, that you can get that stuff aligned. Well, I mean, Tim, we've lived through a strange moment in the world, and you've been driving Profound for a while here. But, you guys focus a lot on the insights, and I'd just be curious to see what your experience was over the last couple of years, and maybe any insights you have on the changes that the pandemic led to in terms of how we work and what customers are looking for going forward.
I think our world's been turned upside down the last 3 years, really, hasn't it? We've had crisis on top of crisis. You can deal with one or two shocks to the system, but what we've had to deal with and what we continue to deal with, I think, is quite extraordinary and unprecedented. And I think you could almost compare what happened in COVID to a little bit to the dot-com bubble that burst in the early noughties, where everyone got very excited about the potential of the internet back in late 90s, early noughties, and then a lot of investment came, and then it dried up quite quickly, and then there was a big fallout from there where people lost their jobs and organizations kind of folded because of that. And what we saw from, if you go back to 2018 when COVID started, was there was the initial shock where everyone was like, okay, we don't really know what's going to happen, but we're gonna respond in the only way we know how, and that's to protect ourselves and defend ourselves. So we're going to cut spending, we're going to preserve our revenues, and then we're going to scrabble around for a few months while we try and work out what all this remote first working is all about, and try and find how to get our cultures kind of transferred into that kind of remote first world. That was I'll come on to that in a minute, but I think that was part of the challenge of survival through that period. It wasn't just about maintaining revenues and opportunities and sales and stuff like that, but also focusing on your team and what it actually meant for them, and realizing that the impact on one person was very different compared to another in your team, because they're at different life stages. Some of our guys were working off ironing boards at home because they didn't have the space to have a home office, and others didn't really affect them because they've got lovely houses in the countryside where they could go out and walk and not see anybody. And you're dealing with those extremes of what life experience is like through a period of time where you're trying to also serve your customers, get your projects completed on time, keep the morale up. I mean, it wasn't just for us, right? It was the same for everybody. That was really, really challenging, and it brought a real focus, I think, on the employees and the care for them. I think across the industry, or across all industries, really kind of elevated, and people were, I think, at that initial shock phase, that was a nice kind of side effect of that there was a lot more compassion, a lot more care, a lot more understanding for how it was affecting people at an individual level. And then from a work point of view, when the initial shock wore off for us, we were actually really well placed to kind of capitalize on the opportunities for digital that came out of it, because all of a sudden the world was told, stay at home, don't go shopping, don't go to the grocery store, all that kind of stuff. And for the likes of the big brands, like you mentioned Tesco's earlier, and the other big supermarkets over here, at least, they'd already got that direct business model set up. So all they had to do was try and scale that. And they had different challenges compared to some of our clients who were in the grocery sector, that actually the store was the primary channel and the online was the secondary channel. And all of a sudden, the online had to service all of the customers. It couldn't cope with the demand. And it wasn't just the core customers that were trying to shop with them. It was everyone else that couldn't get bread or milk from the other, the mainstream stores that were trying to go in with these small grocers as well. So we helped one of our clients who was in that grocery space to really survive, and got them live within 3 months with a brand new platform, so that customers could shop better. And the impact for them for that project was great. They had the best Black Friday ever that year, and it was better than all of their previous 4 Black Fridays combined.
Wow.
And we just did that through through, carefully planned design that was achievable within a time frame, and then smart technology choices that got us to where we need to be really, really quickly. And it kind of saved the brand because, their website was falling over every 10 minutes because customers couldn't order. And then what we also do was help them to reach customers in the parts of the country they never used to be able to reach, that wanted to order from. They were very London centric at the time, and we ended up shipping fresh produce up to Scotland, which was unheard of for that brand. So that was the nice part of the whole pandemic for us, was actually we could make a difference to people. It wasn't just about helping businesses to survive, but also we help people get products that they needed to just survive day to day, and played our part that way. So yeah, I think for me, the highlights, if you want to call them that, were actually having that hyper attention on our team and on our staff at an individual level, and working on projects that went beyond just the bottom line for our customers. They actually made a difference to their customers and helped people cope as well through that period.
Yeah. And I mean, I think it's really insightful, Tim, on what you said. And certainly I think the social inequity that perhaps may have not really been something individuals thought too much about, because everyone was suffering in some form or fashion, could have been magnified, obviously, at different social economic stratas for sure. And then I think what you're highlighting here is that whole idea of omni-channel commerce. We used to use the buzzword of omni-channel before the pandemic. And really, I think what you're highlighting is that need to fill those gaps quickly for companies that perhaps didn't have it scaled to the right extent. And so now when we're starting to move in here to 2023 and looking out in a new way of growing and scaling, what are you seeing? Are you seeing kind of a return to the norm, a continuation of some of these trends, or a new mix?
I think it depends on who you're asking, really. I think, obviously it's easy to talk about the successes of digital transformations through COVID, because those make good stories. But I think there's also a lot of organizations out there that were not digitally mature at the start of COVID. They couldn't scale their team or build a team of expertise because no one really wanted to leave jobs or be recruited through that process. And these guys were kind of fumbling their way through that whole lockdown period, trying to mature digitally, trying to innovate, but doing it without the knowledge and the capability that some other organizations were blessed to have. So I think on one hand, you've got these organizations that have struggled with digital and are going to continue to struggle for a little while longer because the projects are maybe a little bit late, they weren't as successful as they could have been, or they were just canned before they even got delivered, and they don't really still understand what their digital strategy needs to be. So I think those guys really need help and support, because on the other hand, you've got the companies that excelled, who they're competing with. If they were 2 points ahead of them 3 years ago, they're 20 points ahead of them now, because they've got, they had that advantage. They executed digital better, and actually they're at a point now where actually they're using digital to thrive, not to survive. Yeah. They're looking for the innovation that they can deliver through digital. They're not just looking to get to base camp with digital, which I think that's the bit that's going to be really interesting as the next 3 years fade out, is that inequality that I think exists between competing organizations, which comes a lot times down to luck and how far along they were at the start of COVID with their digital transformation kind of journey that they were on. And yeah, I think it's going to be interesting to see how that plays out, and how maybe some of those dominating forces within, or dominating brands within industries, might flip now because of the competitive advantages that they've got.
I mean, over the last couple of years, I'm sure many customers asked you guys about things like blockchain and what it would mean for their business. Certainly, ChatGPT seemed to capture the imagination of the world. Are people now asking you about machine learning?
Yeah, machine learning has been a topic for a while, particularly with regards to data. And I think the key to that is everyone is on this pilgrimage to build data stores, because they understand that data is the key to unlocking more value in the future from their customers. But you can build all the data in the world that you want, and until you understand how to use it and drive that insight from it, it's as worthless to you as if you didn't collect it. And you got to understand about the right type of data to collect. So thinking about, again, a smart use of technology to get across that data, so you're surfacing the insights that are relevant to take action on, or you're automating decisions that the business needs to take based upon the insight you're seeing, is something they're always talking about. We're not we personally are not at the point yet where people are knocking on our door saying we want, GPT on our website and stuff like that. But where we are exploring quite interesting new channels is with I don't know if you've heard of it, something called conversational commerce.
Yep.
I'm really excited about that. I think that's going to be really, really great for customers. They can actually have the experience that they want in the channel that they want, and with no kind of degradation of that experience. If you want to buy something, if you want to buy a bike on WhatsApp Messenger, why can't you do it like that? Why can't you talk in your Messenger and engage and converse with your brands through messengers and chat that is intelligent enough to understand the intent that you want, and when it runs out of the right answers for you because it's run out of the data it needs to make judgments on what you're asking, it flips you over to a real person at that point, and you can flip on that person picks up a smartphone and goes and looks at the bike in the shop or does a video conference with you there and then. I think it's really exciting how you can start bridging that gap between the digital experience and the real life experience with something like conversational commerce. That's the stuff which I think will get our customers excited a little bit more than perhaps some of the stuff that's hitting the headlines at the moment.
No, I agree. I love the idea of conversational commerce and the thought that we would really build such an intuitive system that really could flow with the way you want to live your life and really map to where you are. I've always been a big believer that we've missed the understanding of customers, where we build these essentially destinations, i.e. their physical world things or even digital websites, these giant sites that customers will say, oh, well, I need a website. And you're like, well, actually, no, you really need a way to capture everything from where your customers actually are. And it requires some kind of a different mental I'd say paradigm to tackle that.
I was gonna say, it's just like, you think about how town planning evolved over in the UK over the last 20 years or 30 years. We went from town centres to out of town shopping destinations, and now the trend's coming back to being in town centres. It's about taking the experience to where the customer wants to be, not trying to drag them into places where they don't need to be or they don't want to be. Being available in the right place at the right time is the thing that the brands are finally realizing, I think, at scale right now, that you've got to start exploring the non-conventional stuff that perhaps 10 years ago you would have just poo-pooed as a bit of voodoo, and no one's. I still remember people telling me back in the early noughties, no one's going to buy a shed on a phone, and people really believe that, no one's going to do that, and well, yeah, they will. And they do.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting one for me. One of the things that I have noticed is that whilst I have shifted over to being predominantly an online purchaser now, I still go out and into my local community and want to purchase things at the local stores. And sometimes I've noticed these kind of larger big box stores, the ones that are kind of on the outskirts of town, are suffering a new challenge, which is that their physical stores are almost zombie-like in a way. I mean, it's as if they don't have much product. They tend to push you to the online store when you go there, and it's created, I think, another level of perhaps another pathway that we have to think about, which is, when someone makes that effort to kind of come to a personal space, how do you manage that connection with the idea of kind of what you were talking about, conversational commerce, right? And how you can make that happen. It's a joy. I mean, it's almost endless. And Tim, honestly, you guys have been in the right place, the right time, building this foundation for folks. So tell me, Tim, if someone wanted to learn more about what you and the Profound team are up to, where's the best place to reach you?
So I'm pretty active on LinkedIn. So yeah, happy to connect and have conversations on there. Obviously, they can connect with us on our website, but I think most people these days want to have those conversations out offline on places like LinkedIn. So I'm a good place to start on LinkedIn. I'm sure we can share the link to my profile on the program
Absolutely.
here.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Well, Tim, I really appreciate the time. We've been speaking with Tim McMillan. He's the director at Profound, and we've been talking to him primarily about the evolution of customer experience and digital experience, and really the areas that companies are now focusing on, some of those opportunities that appear during the pandemic, but also kind of some of those challenges of how do you evolve now? Where do you focus now? How do you continue to scale those efforts, and how do you catch up in areas that you're behind in? Tim, it's been amazing to chat with you, and thank you so much for being on the show today.
Thanks, man. Good to see you.
Cheers.